Good morning, all.
Good morning.
I'd like to call to order the November 17th, 2021 meeting of the Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Bethea,
Here.
Commissioner McSwain,
Here.
Commissioner Parr,
Here.
Vice Chair Rogers Garner,
Here.
Commissioner Williams,
Present.
Commissioner Swenson, and Chair Allen.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for October 26, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Commissioner Bethea? Commissioner McSwain?
Yes.
Commissioner Parr?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rogers Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Swenson,
Yes.
Chair Allen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We now move into our financial report for October 2021. Ms. Phillips, will you be presenting this morning?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. We have a couple things we want to review with you today. We do have the October unaudited statements attached in your package, and there are not many transactions, so I'm just going to do a very, very high level. You have at the end of October, $1,058,129. You have two properties at Burton's Point, and I see a quote instead of an apostrophe there, so we'll have to catch that. And you owe a small amount to the city because the city pays your bills pretty much, and then we reimburse the city. Going to the operating revenues, you did collect an industrial revenue bond fee from, I think, the Chantilly YWCA, so we kind of got that caught up. A few contractual services and other, I think, is your share of the indirect cost allocation. So you changed net position, increase of 4,843, ended up in net position at the end of the period of 1,188,192. There is also a budget to actual that I'm not going to spend any time over, but of course, if there's any questions now, or you wake up midnight one night and decide that you're wondering about something, don't hesitate to call or email. The next item is the draft audited financial statements for June 30, 2021, and Ms. Aris Coleman, director with CLA at Clifton Larson Allen, which is a CPA firm that audit, and then Mr. Greg Busnick, who is the principal with the firm, will do their required communications. The auditor of public accounts requires that they communicate directly with the board with the audit, and that's what they're doing. They're meeting their professional standards. And I will just comment that these financial statements are prepared by the city, which is a team of the finance, the people from economic development, city attorney input. So it is definitely a team effort. And the role of the CPA firm is to provide an opinion as to the fairness of those statements. And they will go into some detail about the modification of their opinion this year, which I think is fine for purposes of what we need to use it for. But with that, I maybe stole a little bit of your thunder, but I think it's worth repeating.
All right. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Pleasure to be here and to present to you the June 30th, 2021. I get my years mixed up. Financial statements for the commission. As Patty mentioned, my name is Aris Coleman. I'm a director with CLA, which is the acronym we use, Clifton Larson Allen. On the screen here, big screen is Greg Bussing, and Greg Bussing is the principal overseeing the engagement. He had a prior commitment that he could not be here in person. So we have him on the screen. Greg, you want to go ahead and present? Introduce yourself.
Good morning. Yep. Well, thanks for the introduction, Aries. Yeah, my name is Greg Bussink. I'm a principal at CLA. Apologize couldn't be there in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to participate virtually.
So what we're going to do today, we'll go over our audit process. Greg will then talk about the opinion on the financial statements for the commission, and then we have to require communication with governance, and then we're open for questions. Just our audit process, Patty kind of mentioned it, and first we want to give thanks to the city's finance team as well as the economic development, those who were involved in the process, because the draft financials you have in front of you, they are draft because we are finishing our QC process. We're able to present those as final numbers because we do not expect any material changes to those financial statements. So what you see there, you by the end final product, there may be a the change or something of that a minor wordsmithing, but the product you see in front of you is pretty much reasonably stated in accordance with government general accounting principles. So as Patty mentioned, that the city and the commission prepare the financial statements. We are required, understand this, to assess the reasonableness of those financial statements and as they are presented. And when we say the reasonableness, it's risk-based. We're not looking at 100% of transactions. For the process, we do several different analysis over the financial numbers, and then we do a deeper dive with substantive testing. So some of the things we do at a high level, we have different communications. We did speak with someone here on the board, the commission's board. We did talk with the city attorney. We speak with management. We spoke with the city manager. That's part of getting an idea from a very bird's eye view of any concerns. And then the next thing we do, we look at some year-to-year comparisons, just how things are trending. We look at the environmental factors. I mean, we are in unprecedented times. So with that, then we start looking at the information that's presented in the financials in detail, taking some samples. So when you see the opinion, and we'll Greg go over it in a minute, and it says reasonableness. And we also say that when we're looking at the financial statements, nothing came to our attention that was fraudulent. There was, we are not here to, we did not do a fraud audit. And our opinion doesn't say that. It says that nothing came to our attention that merit the warrant of fraud to be communicated to governance. So with that, for the audit process, I will turn it over to Greg to go over the opinion on the financial statements.
Okay. Well, good morning. So the opinion for this year, we're going to be issuing a modified opinion. The language that'll be in the report, it'll say qualified opinion. And what that means is, it's another term for it is an except for opinion. So we say the financial statements are fairly stated except for, and it's going to go into, the discussion is on the valuation of property held for resale. And it has to do with one of the Burton Point properties. And I think management's discussed this with you already. So what happened was, I guess, that there was a discussion, a decision made to write that value down to an estimated realizable value. And that's what the standards say, is that property held for resale, inventory, those kind of things need to be reported at their acquisition cost or the net realizable value if there's believed to be an impairment loss that incurred. And so management had done an analysis and identified that looked like one of the properties was impaired. They shared that analysis with us, and it was based on some assessment records that were performed. So they came up with an analysis and proposed an adjustment and wrote down the value. They wrote the value down by approximately $321,000, and that's reflected in the financial statements on page 6. You'll see an impairment expense line item. So that's what that is. So it's a reduction in the value. And from our perspective, the financial statements do include estimates, and Eris will talk a little bit about that when she goes over the communication with governance, and it's disclosed in the financial statements. But the assessment value is different than what an appraisal might show for the value of the property. And traditionally, that's what we see as support for the valuation when there is some sort of impairment losses. There's a valuation done by an appraiser that would support the write down in value. So from our perspective, management did prepare an analysis, but it wasn't considered what we consider to be sufficient evidence to support what the value is on the financial statements now. So we have to based on that, we have to issue a modified opinion to basically report that the financial statements are fairly stated except for the value of that property. So that's what would be different when you look at if you were to hold it up to last year's opinion. It would have an extra paragraph, and then the paragraph will be titled, there's one paragraph that says basis for qualified opinion that goes into discussion, and then there's actual, rather than say an unmodified opinion, it says qualified opinion on the financial statements. So it'll look different when you get the final report. That's what I wanted to share. Does that capture it okay, Patty?
Well, I think you need to, Greg, talk about what happens if you didn't write it down.
Okay. If you didn't write it down, but knowing that there's believed to be an impairment, we would have had to issue a modified opinion as well. So I think it shows a good faith effort of management to come up with an estimate, and we do give them credit for that in the report. But we don't know for sure if that's what the actual value is. We don't know if the value is zero, if it's $50, or if it is the value they wrote it down to, which is about $92,510. Down from $414,000. So it's just, we don't have enough information, sufficient, competent, relevant information to show what the actual value is.
Greg, you need to also mention the fact that because the PPIC is included in the city's comprehensive annual report, that the materiality factor.
Sure, that's a good point. Yep. So the PPIC is a component unit of the city. And so when you look at the city's overall financial statements, this won't have an impact on our opinion on the financial statements for the city overall. Within the annual comprehensive financial report, and that term may sound a little different than it used to be called the comprehensive annual financial report, but the acronym CAFR has fallen out of favor, so now it's ACFR. So you may hear that this year. That's new for this year across the board for governmental audits and opinions. But what happens is all the component units get rolled in and are considered one opinion unit on the financial statement. So we evaluate all the component units, which will include the school board, EDA, and the PPIC. So in the aggregate, the PPIC modified opinion won't impact the overall opinion on that opinion unit. A little bit technical, but essentially, this modification won't cause an issue on the overall financial statements of the city.
But I think, Greg, what Patty was saying when we had a discussion about the write down, if they would have left it at the modification was going to be issued either way, but the actual writing it down to the realizable value, because at I think it was $400 and something thousand, when it rolled into the component unit, it was right at materiality threshold. To where if we had if one of the other component units, the schools had an adjustment, then you will look at the city's opinion could have been affected at the component unit.
That's correct. So if the write down had not occurred, then the materiality, we've been pressing up against materiality, and it could have had an impact.
That was really the fundamental issue in my mind, is whether we did this or not. Yeah. But I hope.
All right, so I'll go on with the rest of the communications with governance, and then we'll take any questions. So for this year, as of June 30th, 2020, there were no new accounting principles that affected the commission's financial statements. There were no difficulties during the audit. We do appreciate, as Greg mentioned, when we were going through the whole process of trying to determine the value of the land at year end, the amount of information that we were provided from management and discussions all around from everyone, kind of got us a really good idea of what's going on with with the property. There were no corrected or uncorrected errors suggested by us. We did not have any disagreement with management. In order to issue the financial statements, Management will sign a representation letter to us. And overall, their representation letter is stating that all the information provided during the audit was accurate, true, and it has not changed since 6/30/2021. And that's a big piece because right now we're in November. The date of the opinion will be in November. And if there was anything subsequent to June 30th that affected last fiscal year, we need to know that so that can be presented in the financial statements. CLA is proud to be the auditors for the commission in the city, and this is our first year. So as part of that process, we do ask management, could you consult with any other auditors before awarding us the contract? And what we're looking for is that you discuss any concerns and say, well, we have this issue. If we handle it this particular way, would you give us an unmodified opinion, or how would you handle it? Those generally, they are looked upon, frowned upon for our industry, and generally the financial statements should stand alone and auditors are independent. And before the audit, we did not discuss any significant issues with city management, the commission, or the authority before being retained as the auditors. We also issued a report on internal controls over financial reporting for the commission. And what that is, under government auditing standards, we're required to assess internal controls over financial reporting and determine if there are any significant issues that need to be reported in accordance with standards. And we did not have any significant issues or material weaknesses that were required to be reported as part of government auditing standards. So that's all the communication I'm required to make. Greg, before we open for questions, do you have anything?
I just want to thank management for their help. Even though we did have a report modification, the information was available, was in good condition. They were very helpful, so we appreciate their help. Especially in a first-year engagement, there's a little bit of a learning curve, and their assistance helped us get through the process efficiently and effectively.
Great. I always called the term you referred to about consulting other kind of opinion shopping, so none of that occurred. We weren't trying to buy a good opinion.
It was a fair procurement process. Went out for bid, evaluation process went through. So yeah, the government procurement process is a little more onerous probably than private companies, but yeah, it's the course of how you do business. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that we would ask the commissioners to accept the audit, the draft audit that you will receive when they issue their final opinion, which should be real soon, next few days. Hopefully before Thanksgiving, right?
That's right, yeah. Actually, I think the commission was, I think it should be clear, it's probably this week, so we hopefully before Thanksgiving.
Okay, great.
Are there any questions from commissioners?
Yes. Is this the actual report?
Yes.
Okay. And where will it be recorded?
Well, the commission is required to submit it to APA, the auditors account for the Commonwealth.
Okay. That's it.
Mr. Barr?
Is it your recommendation, and I'm not sure legally how much you can recommend, that we do perform an appraisal on that property to be able to bolster the case for the change in value, or it's not relevant?
The property is already written down.
So it's after the
I mean, it
fact.
would be management decision. I guess Greg can get more to that, but I would say it's basically looking to what you guys want to do, but it's really more management of what you guys looking to do with the property and if the appraisal is even worth it. Greg, you want to add on?
Yeah, it comes down. I guess it's a cost benefit decision. That's what drives all financial decisions, right? It's, is it worth the appraisal to get to where you need to support it, and does it impact what you need to have an unmodified opinion? So, in theory, if you sold the property tomorrow, this whole issue goes away. The gain or loss would be realized, and it's done. If it's on the books and we get back to June 30 next year, we have to revisit it. Depending, it comes down to cost benefit, and management ultimately has to make that decision. But an appraisal would more than likely result in the removal of the modification.
for next year.
for next year. It's just a matter of if it's needed, or like I said, if you sell it, then it's a moot point.
Well, Greg, I just wanted to reiterate that unless the appraiser knows the cost of remediation, then the appraisal is going to not recognize, most appraisers aren't able to do that unless they have an engineer's report telling them what the remediation is. So, we may be, we'll have to think about that as we move forward.
Mr. Park?
Just another question, just for clarification. The evidence to justify the write-down in expenses was the wetlands report specifically, or was it other information since the wetlands report?
It's primarily the wetlands report and the restricted use of it, of the property.
My only concern is the wetlands report was finished in 2017. So I know different staff has come and gone during that time, but we held the property at its value until almost 4 years after the wetlands report. So that to me is a little concerning.
Well, yeah, in hindsight, but hindsight is always 20/20. But the issue is that we are addressing it now.
Yeah.
Any other questions from commissioners? Barring none, thank you both for your presentations this morning and your hard work completing the audit. Thank
Thank
you.
You're welcome. If you think of any questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out, let us know, or let Patty know, and we will get you an answer. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, Madam Chair, here's the situation. The city's audit is due December 15th, which is likely before your next scheduled meeting, although I'm not sure what the December schedule will be with the holidays. You've heard the gist of the report. You've got this written part. What EDA elected to do yesterday was to vote to accept the audit with the proviso that if anyone had comments or concerns, they would send them to Ms. Phillips within a week, and if the concerns were sufficient to require another meeting to discuss everything, then a special meeting would be called. But they took care of the actual acceptance of the audit at yesterday's meeting, so there wasn't going to definitely be a necessity for a special.
Okay. I like a consensus from the commissioners. You'd like to move forward with the vote on the draft with the caveat that Mr. Miller has just made, that if there are any additional questions, they're submitted to Ms. Phillips within a week's time frame so that they can be discussed. Mr. Swenson, what say you? You? Okay, Mr. Williams?
No.
Mr. Thea? No. Mr. Rogers Garner? Ms. McSwain?
I would move it forward, yes.
I'm taking a consensus that we want to move forward.
I would like to move forward.
Mr. Parr?
Or we could move our December meeting to be before the 15th and kind of do 2 birds with 1 stone.
So that I know on the first one, then I'll go around again?
Just, if we're just discussing consensus,
Mhm.
I'm fine with that. That's fine. But I'm thinking we're going to meet on December. Do we want to meet on December 28th, or do we want to meet on December 13th or 14th?
We ain't gotten to that part yet, so I want to handle this for right now. Are you okay with us
Yeah, I'm
moving
okay
forward
with
with with the caveat that was listed?
Yes.
Okay. So then, I need a motion to accept the draft with the caveat mentioned by council. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? All right, no discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Bethea,
Yes.
Commissioner McSwain,
Yes.
Commissioner Parr,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rogers Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Swenson,
Yes.
and Commissioner,
Yes.
motion passes.
Just a reminder, please make sure you read the draft. If there's any questions, please forward them to the chair, the vice chair and myself so that we can get them to Ms. Phillips and get your answers.
And we're doing a week from today.
Yes, ma'am.
I will have them hold their opinion, because they'll be ready this week, but I will have them hold it till next Tuesday.
Thank you. Okay, old business, the PPIC Incentive Program Ad Hoc Committee, Vice Chairwoman Rogers Gardner.
Well, first I want to thank the staff for being very accommodating to the extra meetings that we've been having. We are moving forward with a draft to present to you guys in the January meeting. We went more so with the idea of creating job opportunities for the incentive program. Staff is going to draft proposals for the incentive program, and you should have that at the January meeting. If anything happens that alters that plan, we will update you at the December meeting. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Any questions in regards to the ad hoc committee? Barring none. Unfortunately, we do not have a Port of Virginia update as our representatives are currently unavailable for this morning's meeting. So we will move into new business, the city assessor's briefing.
And Madam Chair, we have Mr. Patrick Doris, the city assessor, here this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Recognize we have
Commissioner of
Commissioner
Revenue.
Revenue. Frankie Evans.
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Pat Doris. I'm the new city assessor. I took the opportunity to ask Frankie Edmondson to come out here with me to discuss because I met a couple of commissioners out the line at opening, and there were some questions about the taxation of the PMT of Virginia Port Authority. And will we be able to do it, and how much may it be? Yes, we will be able to do it, provided that they're tax exempt, they're non-tax exempt properties going on to it. And we know there are. We've heard that there's 3 leases out there. There's, of course, one with Virginia Energy, a partnership with Virginia Energy and Siemens, and then there's a third one with, or I think it's Audited or something like that. And they're, 70 acres, 80 acres, 40 acres. Those are not tax exempt entities. Therefore, the Code of Virginia allows us to tax those. There's an additional provision. Once I get the lease information and determine all the specifics to the lease, I'll have a better clue how the number will play out. However, in a nutshell, the code also puts in a provision that it must be written down 2% for every year less than technically 49 years, but let's just use 50 years. So it's reduction because there's no reversionary value once the lease is over. So in other words, they're leasing the property. Once it's up, it reverts back to the tax exempt entity, Virginia Port Authority. So yes, there are provisions to lease it. And I have a few scenarios. The real question comes, what is the capitalization rate? It is very safe. There is some subjectivity to it. I don't want to speculate on a capitalization rate. And then also it has to be reduced at 2% every year, less than 50 years. And what I know about one lease is it will run 10 year and it has 2 5-year options. That's 20 years. So I'll capitalize the value and take off for the 30 years, actually 29 years difference, have a value. Running through the numbers on one scenario, and this was just specific to what's been publicly announced, the Dominion Energy lease. I think they were talking, correct me if I'm wrong, about $4.2 or $4.4 million per year. And I just utilizing that number and running through the mechanics, I come up with roughly on the low side, $250,000 in taxes attributed to that roughly 80 acres. Now we could speculate, clearly speculating, that we could possibly apply the same thing to the 72 acres and then half that for the 40 acres. But again, without the lease information, I don't know. So could it possibly be as much as $1 million or very close to it in revenue in terms of actual cash every year? Possibly. So I think that's what everybody wanted to hear or have a sense of, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
First, welcome to the city of Portsmouth.
Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Parr?
Could you give us a brief overview of the machinery tax? Just a
And-
quick primer.
Absolutely. I brought Frankie in to touch base on that because I don't want to step out of my bounds. I reached out to him and it's like, Frankie, can you give me a crash course in case I get that question? And he goes, yeah, Pat, like Yeah, turn it around the other way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frankie to address the machinery issue.
Good morning, sir. Please.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, number one, I want to thank you for having me here, and I thank Pat for inviting me to share his time with the present for a very exciting time in Portsmouth, as you well know. I mean, this is extremely exciting, and I welcome an opportunity at some future date to come back and give you some ideas once we get a whole lot further down the road here. But one, let me thank you for your service, because I've served on boards and commissions for the city before, and I know it's a true labor of love, if you will, for you to take the time to even have this interest and to do the city's business. So one, thank you for your service to the city. I've been a commissioner of revenue here for 15 years. I'm in my 16th year, and thanks to you and others, I'm going to be going into my 5th term. So I know a little bit about revenue here in Portsmouth. And we got a great economic development team, and Mr. Moore and his group have really tried to pull that together. We have a good working relationship with them. So anything I say today, please don't be dismayed and don't be upset and unhappy with me, because I know Ms. Phillips, we work well together, and she can tell you over the years, it sounds like a great, wonderful opportunity for Portsmouth. And then you get down to the nuts and bolts of what about the machinery and tools, and what about who's going to pay for this and who's going to pay for that. So I want to give you some information today. I'm very excited about the 3 emerging technologies. So anybody in Portsmouth that tells you we're not excited about things going on, but the devil's in the details, right? So you're most interested in the port, and we're going to cover that in one quick second, but you've got 3 emerging technologies. You've got the casino gaming, which we're one of 5 across the whole state that's going to be doing that. You've also have the medical marijuana distribution site, which is only one of 5 in the Commonwealth. And then you've got this wind turbine and everything that's happening on the PMT. So we are very encouraged, exciting, and happy to do it, but I still have the same staff members and the same folks. And so we've got to retool, if you will, rethink some of these things. We're the only ones in the state that have this wind turbine. We're the first in the country, right, to bring that here. So we should be really celebrating that. Except Virginia's a Commonwealth state, right? Dillon rules. So this is where I want to get down to it. Please don't leave here today thinking that I am not excited about this opportunity. But what you have is, if it's taxation is the rule, exemption is the exception. Okay, meaning that every business, every entity that's supposed to be taxed will be taxed. If you don't believe that, come to our office about April, May timeframe, when we get all these calls from individuals that think we've done such a wonderful job on their personal property and on their cars, right? So come on in, and we'll be more than happy to help you answer the phone, because everybody's going to get taxed, unless, of course, they say, what? Here's my exemption. Special legislation sometimes extends that exemption. Why does Portsmouth know about that? Clearly, the tolls. You come through the tunnel, you see all this equipment overhead, and you say, man, this is great. We're getting all this money. And guess what? We're not. So what I'm trying to tell you is these emerging technologies are designed to help urban centers, if you will, physically stressed localities. And in Portsmouth, we have to learn how to play within those rules to make sure that we get every stone turned and every dollar that's supposed to come here. Traditionally, a manufacturer is $3 per 100. They do give a break to them. However, so we had over the years 68 manufacturers in the city of Portsmouth. That's those individuals who created the paperwork to be recognized as a manufacturer. Over the years, because of COVID, because of some other economic conditions, you can name some of the ones that you'll see. We've lost a few, right? Waltney and some other folks. We were one of the largest producers of hot dogs in the world. Who knew that? Did you know that? Now we're not. It's in Kinston, North Carolina, because we lost them to that area. So and you want to know about the machinery and tools and equipment? They came in, they busted a big hole in the side of the building, took their equipment out, and we don't know where that equipment is now. If it's not here, you can't tax it, right? So The two main things we look at is are they going to have an exemption? And the other major thing, which I doubt this will happen there, is obsolescent rate. By April 1st, they can notify us that their equipment is obsolete, is not going to be used for that year, for that purpose. And then, of course, we have the burden of making sure that what they've asked for maintains. So what I'm suggesting to you is we do have a host of opportunities. We're excited about that. And we also have a lot of work to do to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire. But if it's in that special legislation that they get a exemption, chances are they're possibly going to get that. And I'm sorry for the long answer, but I think it's important for us to know that we got to work through those nuances. And ordinarily, individuals that are going to pay a high tax bill, they're not standing in line to race down here and pay. I'll just tell you that. So I want to thank the men and women that work in our office every day who fight the good fight. If you notice, we just reported we were recognized and accredited again for our state association accredits each office, and that's a true testament to the individuals that work with us, most of which are master deputy commissioners of revenue through the University of Virginia. So we got some very talented folks working in our city on your behalf and on my behalf every day, trying to generate revenue for the city. So we're going to take a hard look at them. And we're going to make sure that if they're supposed to pay a dime in Portsmouth, then we're going to get 11 cents out of it, right?
Right.
So what I'm suggesting to you is I don't want them to pay 1 cent more than what they owe, but I damn sure want them to pay what they do owe, right? So I'm going to tell you, that's our hard line. And if you don't believe that, then like I say, come on down to City Hall. And, you know, we're in court some, and we're in, we've had some great experiences, but I'm going to be honest with you, it's costly to go to court. You know, right across the water from that site is what? VIG, right? Virginia International Gateway. They came in for 8 years. They paid. We had a wonderful working relationship with them. They ended up selling the property or selling the facility, if you will, one of the most advanced ports in the world, to a investment firm. And they said, what? We don't want to pay any taxes. That's not realistic. You don't want to pay any taxes, you know.
Right.
So we go, but the one thing that we had in our favor is we had bill of lading, we had everything from when that port was established. So we maintained records and we went through a history. And when we got to court, we won at the local level. They weren't satisfied with that. They took us to the state Supreme Court, a big law firm out of Norfolk. How many people's ever had a root canal? Been to the dentist and that's kind of what it's like going over to Norfolk to the 26-story building and sit over there and get you all these questions. I know you're represented by counsel, and I don't mean to disrespect, but it's not fun to, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? But we did it, and we went to the Supreme Court of Virginia, and guess what? Unanimous consent decision, which is not always the case for Portsmouth tax. So we have a team that I know in practice and legally, you know, will be able to sustain. But we got to have the tools, and we got to have the personnel, and we got to have the resources to do what's necessary to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire. So
Absolutely.
we are going to be looking at that, and we have to, but it's got to come in time. You know, all these plans are being announced now, but what actually happens there? Because as an example, your gross receipts tax are reported after you make them, right? So you're in business a year, and then you come in the following year and you report what did you make, unless you do an estimate at what point then we've got to offset, if you will, at the end of the year to determine what you actualize. But the reality of it is taxation is a little bit different. They're not going in the store, picking up something, put it in the basket, get ready to pay for it. It's not really, it's similar to that, but it is not that. I mean, in other words, you know, we're working with people. It's a 3-year to 4-year reality before you potentially can get some of that. And a new business, and when we first did VIG, you know, several years ago, they bought and amassed $68 million worth of equipment. Now imagine that. So how quickly can you put that on our systems? And can our system accommodate that? We've had a situation here in Portsmouth where the tax bill was so high we had to send 2 bills because our systems couldn't accommodate that.
Correct.
So what I'm suggesting to you is that we got to be prepared for success. It's very difficult. How would you like to receive 2 bills for one tax bill? It's difficult to explain that. So I had to do some dancing, if you will, and we got the bill paid, but the long and short of it is, we have to be ready for the success, and we have to know, that clean energy, I think it's Virginia Clean Energy Act, I think is what helps to create some incentives. And it's all, and I'm not, don't profess to be an expert in economic development, but you have to put something on the table to attract them here, right? There's a reason why they're here. Is it location? We hope. What's the, how many people saw the editorial today? Portsmouth's in the right place at the right time, right? So today they got something nice to say about Portsmouth. And Ms. Jones, I'm gonna ask you to please take that out, frame it, so you'll have a history of that it did occur. They did say one thing nice about Portsmouth. And so we're gonna get it right on your behalf. I think that's an excellent question. Manufacturing is what you might think they do, but if they have an exemption through that special legislation, then we'll have to be particular with that.
Always a caveat, maybe.
But I will say this, I will give you this. If with the chair indulgence, I mean, if you have questions, obviously reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to come back once we get further down the road and give you some details if you are interested at that point, specifically about what might be related to that property. Now, we can't give specifics about that business, but of course we can have general discussions and you'll know kind of where we are. But I don't know, Madam Chair, if that helps to answer.
Does anyone have any further follow-up questions for Mr. Edmiston or for Mr. Doris? Mr. Parr?
I'm not sure if you've reviewed the legislation already, the Virginia Clean Energy Act, but are there exemptions already specified in that act for their type of business?
Well, it's currently under review right now, and I'll just be honest with you. The legalese are looking at that. We are represented by a firm out of Richmond. They helped us with the prior litigation. I don't hope it doesn't come to litigation. We open each case and each account, if you will, each business with the idea that potentially can go to court. And I just think you prepare yourself better if you say we might end up there, so we better start preparing for it now. The reality of it is we haven't concluded all of those exemptions at this point, so I'm not prepared to tell you yes or no. I mean, it's under review right now, so our hope is that they want to be good corporate citizens and they will come and that we'll have a dialogue and say, but at this point, no other locality is having this type of discussion in the Commonwealth. I mean, nobody else is doing this. It's not like I can get somebody on the phone in Norfolk or Newport News or, Loudoun County or something and say, what are you guys doing there? Because they're not doing that. And I don't want to speak for the attorney's office, but they're overloaded with case after case. I mean, and so I've got a meeting today at 3:00 with a local outside attorney trying to get some other matters resolved. But I mean, it's just we'll work through the painstaking process of it. The challenge that we have, and I'll just tell you, the Port Authority has a dual role. Obviously, there's a state agency. So when the Port Authority is involved, they don't necessarily have Portsmouth citizens' interest. We're dual citizens, right? We're citizens of Portsmouth, but we're also citizens of Virginia. So when we got the bad news, if you will, that the port's going to go to VIG and all this stuff's going to take place, and our for-profit businesses being inundated by a not-for-profit state agency authority, that took $2.7 million out of our budget. Okay, nobody wants to have that discussion. It's great for VIG to be there, and they'll tell you, the state will say, oh, it's the most advanced port, and this and this, this, and guess what? 2.7 million, 2.3, between 2.3 and 2.7 million, we're having to find ways to make up because now it's not taxable. So, I mean, I don't want to get into weeds with you, but I mean, we got to have those discussions. The lawsuit was prior to the Port Authority taking over that. I mean, it ended up spilling into it, but their challenge was for our involvement was with the parent owner, not with the state. So, and ironically, what I did learn is that they don't really have our best interest at heart. And so we got to have the tools because they have a caveat in their agreement that says what? If we go to litigation, that the Port Authority testifies on behalf of their company, not us. You would think they would be representing us. So imagine that. You go to court and the Virginia Port Authority is on the opposing side. So my answer to that is, I have to stand up for Portsmouth first, because you elected me to stand up for your interest. And so what I'm suggesting to you is, that's why we gotta have the tools in our toolbox, to do that. And it's very exciting, but can you imagine, one of these in a decade is, in a time period is great, but 3 of them at one time, I mean, we're gonna have some challenges ahead of us, but we welcome them. I mean, I'm excited. This is exciting times, but I'm not familiar with all of those nuances just yet, but I can get back to you on that.
Ms. Rogers Garner?
So the space that we're in right now at inception, not knowing how it would benefit the city of Portsmouth, is not an uncommon space when we have businesses like this coming here.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know, Pat, you might, you know some certainties, but when they finish, you don't know how to really assess everything until it's done.
Until it gets there, correct.
Right.
And just piggybacking back off the VIG thing, we were also sued, and it's a protracted lawsuit, ultimately settled. As I understand, it was bleeding the city money year after year after year. So at some point, you have to make the decision to be financially responsible for the city. Where do we cut our losses? Where do we make those gains? And when these big number deals, assessment, they generate interest, concern, and potential lawsuits. Let's not beat the bush about it. That's a reality. Casino, the Portsmouth Marine Terminal, VIG was one. Those are potential lawsuits, or one in fact lawsuit. The other very well could result in a lawsuit. We don't want to,
Yeah.
but the likelihood is better than a roll of the dice.
Well, it's like everything else. Somebody shows up and they want to tell you something, they're going to do a project or whatever. It all sounds great, but you got to get it on paper. You got to get it. The devil's kind of in the details, so to speak. And
Right.
I keep going back to that because when we went to VIG, of course, the parent company was APM Moller. They couldn't have been better corporate citizens. I mean, we dealt with people in New Jersey, outstanding for us 8 years, okay? And then when somebody sends you a check, $2.7 million, I remember getting that check. I knew it was coming. I took it over to the treasurer and I said, will you please sign this receipt that you have the check? He said, why are you making me sign a receipt? I said, I never brought you a $2.3 million check. And then now it's in your care, custody, and control. And I get to step across the hall, back across the hall, and, be there. So to make a long story short, it's nice to get that check. However, you got to go through a whole lot of revelations to get to that point. And so to your point, I mean, we get a lot of mom and pop opening businesses, and we get a lot of entrepreneurs here, and they're doing great things. This magnitude of something like this, as an example, and I'll just use VIG as a lead into this. That was basically for our office would have been in the city would have been a $3.8 million offset if they had won that case. And you probably didn't hear about it because the pilot didn't want to report all that. But the bottom line is we were on the hook. I mean, $1.7 million legal fees to go to Supreme Court of Virginia. So you tell me, and I would suggest to you is a lot less than it would have been because we had done our due diligence from the very beginning of starting the process. I'd like to think that we helped them, offset some of those costs, but going to court is costly. And is there 10% interest if you, recover from the court award? And so that's something we have to prepare. It sounds great when you're setting all these big and wonderful things up, but of course there's a risk and reward. I came from banking, so pardon that reference, but it's a risk and reward when you get into looking at these types of deals, and the decisions that you make here obviously impact the city on the front run. But if you get into litigation, obviously it could, be potentially big. That's why I think it's important to take the due diligence up front and try to get it straight before we get started. And here again, you can have agreed upon values and you can have other things too. There'll be a long dance process before we get to the final version of what it's going to be. And pardon this, but sometimes council members and sometimes city management and sometimes maybe even finance directors don't understand that because they're looking to fund a budget and we're looking at the assessment pieces larger than that budget.
As Mr. Edmondson knows, these are businesses, and I've seen this happen so many times over the years. These companies retain staff, and their job is to reduce taxes wherever they're located. And that's all they do. And so they'll surprise you. You know, they want to make a deal, but over on the side, they're looking and researching ways that they can reduce their tax impact. And so, yeah, we don't know yet.
Correct. I'm glad you realize that. That's the reality of these large corporations.
Well, we have a fighting chance, and we have a chance. We're in the game now. We're at the dance. We've been invited to the table, so hopefully we can, with your help, continue to do that and get some more businesses here.
Any further questions from commissioners?
What was your statement? You said, I like it. If taxation is the rule, then what was the rest?
Oh, taxation is the rule.
Oh, is
Exemption is the exception.
the exception.
In other words, we're gonna tax them up front. I mean, at some point, we'll get to a point of where we're gonna tax them. And then, if they do have an exemption, that's when we, back off of the tax.
So everybody should expect to be taxed.
But that's our role. The Constitution requires us to tax everyone, statutes. So our goal is to tax everyone. And then, of course, if they have the exemption, so taxation is the rule, exemption is the exception. So if they do have that exception, obviously we have, like a political subdivision, a state, or like the Port Authority.
Right.
Portsmouth is inundated with those exceptions because you got the Naval Shipyard, you got the Naval Hospital, you got the Coast Guard base. 52, I think it's, what is it, Brian? 53% of our land mass is not taxable. I mean, we're in that every day. We see that every day, whether it be a nonprofit, a church, or what have you. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Thank you, gentlemen, so much. I appreciate it.
thank you very much, and thank you, Pat, for asking me to be here. We'll be in touch.
At this time, we have an item that needs to be discussed in closed session. Madam Vice Chair.
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711, 8.3, for the purpose of discussing the acquisition and or disposition of real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically regarding 3920 and 3930 Burton Point Road and 06th Street and 1603 7th Street.
There's a motion on the floor. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Bethea?
Yes.
Commissioner?
Oh, Commissioner, I'm like answering.
Very clear. Commissioner McSwain?
Yes.
Commissioner Parr?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rogers Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Swinson? And Chair Allen.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are in closed.
Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.
I hereby move that each commissioner certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bethea.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Bethea?
Yes.
Commissioner McSwain?
Yes.
Commissioner Parr?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rogers Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Swinson?
Yes.
And Chair Allen.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are in open meeting.
Thank you. Items submitted by commissioners. Mr. Parr.
Since we're done with that, I guess we have more on our plate. I have a personal relationship with the second in command, that is the Admiral for Business and Strategic Operations at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard. And I believe it would be good for us as a board to form a subcommittee to restart conversations with the Navy regarding their land and their plans around. So I wanted to propose to you as the chair about forming this committee and if so, I'd like to serve as part of that committee.
Okay, and I'd like to get some input from staff on that proposal. You feel like you want to say something, Mr. Moore?
Just standing for questions if you got them. That's all.
Historically, we've been in conversation with the shipyard and their command, as well as their staff. We've had some changes recently with their staff members who have received the process. I'm not quite sure they have the individual in place yet. I believe they've got somebody filling in at this time. We can certainly reach out to get an update. They are working through some processes in relation to making land available there. I believe the last that we heard, there's environmental studies that are being done, as you're aware of the requirements for that type of work. We're certainly happy to reach out to them to get an update on their status, but we've had conversations with this board's desire to kind of rekindle that and have participation. We're certainly able to do that.
Can you give me a little bit more in depth on what your thoughts are in regards to if we are to convene a committee? What are your thoughts on?
So the vice chair did point out that we're trying to do a number of things. And I think us as 7 members, it would be good for each of us to serve on a subcommittee as they come up and as are needed, to be able to provide specific attention to that and reports back to the board in relationship to that.
I was more so thinking of when you say having the conversations with the person that you have the relationship with, what is the end goal for that?
To understand, I guess, where the Navy is at with their thoughts, but if staff is accomplishing that function already, perhaps then this subcommittee is more just to be able to liaison with them, with those staff specifically, and have board oversight of those activities.
What are your thoughts on that?
I believe what we could do, first and foremost, would be to reach out to our partners at the Navy, ask for an update, and perhaps even have them come present before the commission to inform you all of where they are in the process. There is a process again. This is a somewhat lengthy one, somewhat complex, but we could ask that they come and present to you all and provide the commission an update. Deputy City Manager Moore, I believe, was it?
Just want to add to that, if I can, Chair. This conversation or these conversations have been ongoing for several years. And the suggestion from staff would be that you also have the mayor, who has historically been involved in these discussions, because I can tell you that there's always been a conversation of if we do this, we need you to do this, you being the city. So you're going to want to make sure council is involved in those conversations, because ultimately I don't think it's something that this board will be able to tackle effectively on its own. So just wanted to put that out there from that standpoint.
May I ask a question? Sure. When you say city council, so would that, is it the mayor specifically, or should it be our liaisons from the city council?
It's been typically the mayor, and then we also had, I think at the time, Elizabeth Simmons was the vice mayor at one point, and she was involved. What I will tell you is, I'll give you an example. The needs of the shipyard always are around parking. So if the shipyard comes and asks, well, we'll give you, or states, hey, we may allow you to have this property, but we need a parking deck. That's not his board. So those are conversations that I would say, again, you'd have council involved. Keep in mind, there's also a joint land use study that is going on. And I can tell you that staff has also been in contact with in working with the city of Chesapeake because of property that is off of, at the joint annex. So, I mean, there are a lot of discussions going on, but I think with changes on the shipyard side, the Navy side, city side, I think we've kind of all been, I think we need to update, like Mr. Donahue stated, and then kind of see where they are, because it is a lengthy process. And I think at one point there was even a discussion of potentially an RFP in some way, shape, or form. Which why would the city go into an RFP or something. But, that's just a side note. There are a lot of pieces to it, but I think if staff can get the update and bring that back to you, then you can make a more informed decision on which way you want to go.
Mr. Party, Adriana.
This is a question for the city attorney. The mayor would be able to serve on that committee because he's an ex officio member of our board, or it would have to be some other sort of formal structure?
Well, I don't think the mayor would technically be on the committee. I just the mayor would just be
Part of the conversation. I agree with staff. I mean, I'm not trying to put more cooks in the kitchen, but I do believe for us as 7 members, it would be good for us to start to specialize in certain areas of knowledge as it relates to port and industry. And so like we have the ad hoc committee, covering that work and working with staff and gaining more knowledge in that regard. I think we can't ignore the reality of the Norfolk Naval Shipyard and its influence in Portsmouth and on the port and the industry. So I think maybe we wait, get an update, and then we can sort of go from there.
Yes, I do. Just for my own knowledge, when you guys were having the conversations before with the previous board, was there an ad hoc committee that was formed for that particular? I know you said that there was someone who already had a relationship with the military.
Yeah, so those conversations were the chair and the vice chair at the time. So that's who, led that charge. More specifically, Mr. Ron Peterman, who was the vice chair, was part of those discussions. And again, we had discussions for several months before we even got a clear answer on direction. But I mean, it's government, and it's like anything, hot and cold. One day the shipyard may be expanding. The next 2 weeks later, now we got that on hold. We're going in a different direction. So I do think the best course of action would be for staff to get you that update, and then like I said, I think you make an informed decision in which direction you want to go.
I'll agree with that as well. Mr. Park?
That's fine.
Mr. McSwain? Mr. Swenson? Mr. Williams?
I agree.
Mr. Thayer?
Okay, so we'll reach out and, we'll make contact and get an update, and then we'll work to come back to you at a future meeting with an
Invite
agenda
them to come.
item and have them come and make a presentation. We'll keep you posted on the status of that.
Okay. Any other items submitted by commissioners? Ms. Park?
I'm not trying to lengthen our meeting, but as a follow-up to our retreat that we had with EDA, one of the primary concerns that was mentioned was workforce development. I wanted to see what other board members thought of us either working with EDA, us working alone, because I saw a pretty disturbing statistic from Starbase, which is the STEM program that's for all 4th, 5th, and 6th graders in Portsmouth. And only 20%, well, less than 20% of the positions at Norfolk Naval Shipyard are actually staffed by people who reside in Portsmouth. There's nothing wrong with people living where they live. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I think we would like to position Portsmouth citizens to be best prepared for jobs at the shipyard and then jobs that are coming down the pike with PMT, with all these companies that we mentioned. Wanted to sort of take the temperature of the other board members if they feel like this is an issue that we need to look more closely in, leave it to EDA. It was just very surprising when I read that report from Starbase.
I haven't seen the report, I guess, because my further question would be, how many Portsmouth residents who work there, who left there, reasons for leaving. Is it that we don't have enough trained labor for their, what's currently being offered? I think that's a conversation with the schools as well, in addition to workforce development. We currently have some programs that are ongoing that I would want the opinion whether or not people are participating in those programs, such as the truck driver. So I mean, because then you kind of have an opportunity to gauge where the efforts are. Are programs available at times where the underemployed would be able to participate, because there's plenty of people who are employed, but they're underemployed. So for example, if you want to take a course and it has to be available in the evening because you work during the day, and if it's not available in the evening, then how do we get that to that point so that citizens who actually want to participate to better the lives of themselves and their family, how do we make that available to them? Sometimes it's access. So I would like to have some additional information on that. Mr. Moore, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, we have the Portsmouth at Work. You're actually in the Portsmouth at Work networking center. I think staff can come back from a workforce development standpoint and give you an update on what we've done since this opened. And the participants, who's participating in what programs, so on and so forth. And then that way you can have that gauge of knowledge as far as, what is currently going on. Yeah, I mean, while there are a number of reports out there as to there are open these positions are open, or they're, people don't, work where they live kind of situation, but typically there are reasons, as you stated, how many folks were there, how many folks, left there. But I think staff can give you an update on that probably in the January meeting, just because I know Ms. Kroom will not be here during that time frame in December. So maybe in the January meeting, I'll leave that up to Mr. Donahue. But yeah, I think if you get the overview of what we've done so far, or what staff has done so far as workforce development, then you can decide which direction again you would like to go.
In your opinion, what do you see PPIC's engagement in helping to facilitate a better return on those opportunities?
I think that still remains to be seen, because, this is new to Portsmouth, and this is really new to the region. I mean, because other than the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, it's been Tidewater Community College, it's been Paul D. Camp. So on a local level, you haven't had this type of engagement. But I can tell you, we've, just off the numbers, I know from the last time in talking to Ms. Kroom, we've had well over 800 participants. We've held 3 different or 2 different job fairs. There's another one coming, I think the Amazon one is today. So, and then you have to look at, while you have these things, what are the participation numbers for those events? So, I think EDA has put a lot of effort into it, and I think we're still early. I mean, because this facility opened May the 7th, so we're talking about 6 months of this being physically open. Virtually, we've been open since February. So, I think by the time you get to that January, February timeframe, that gives you a year or 12 months of numbers. And then again, I think once you get those numbers and that information, then you can decide. But I think right now, it's in EDA's wheelhouse, and then you just kind of decide from there.
I'm going to Ms. Gordon-Rogers.
Has this board ever had a retreat to think about things that, or how it wants to be impactful in the past?
So we've attempted to have a retreat before. And, I think what you have is historically, this board has been in similar situations where you all are now. Financially, not a lot of money in the bank per se. So you're working with a little bit and you want to be as impactful as possible. When we've had retreats, we've made sure we included those individuals or this board in the EDA retreat because of the similarities. But specifically their own retreat, I think we try to do that initially with this board, but you all had just come on when we did that. Certainly we could have one, should that be your purview.
I would like to revisit the idea after we get the presentation for the ad hoc incentive committee in January, and then following that, maybe incorporate a retreat so we can get on one page and be strategic about what we want to do and what we're capable of doing. So that way it doesn't feel like we're just maybe throwing ideas out there. We hone in on how, impactful we want to be. Does that make sense?
Certainly agree.
Would we want a facilitator for that?
I would say, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Park?
Oh, I was going to say my comment about the workforce. it wasn't, I wanted a report necessarily from staff because I think the program is excellent. So I wasn't saying like we need to improve what EDA staff, UBIC staff is doing. It was more so in the same regard as the Navy, possible Navy subcommittee, where members of our group, if the board sees, maybe once we have a retreat and we prioritize what we're doing, that we start to, again, specialize in things, and we start to develop relationships with the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, with the school board, to be able to help direct policy more so. It wasn't a comment, nor the Navy was a comment about what our staff is doing. It was more so for our board to start specializing in different areas and being responsible and coming back, because we are trying to do a lot of things. It'd be easier if we all sort of took up a different aspect.
I think it would make more sense in a retreat.
Yeah.
You know, where we kind of hammer out these things and we decide what this board wants to look like.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think about cautioning, certain individuals maintaining certain relationships, and then they either go away, and then that relationship has to be started all over again. I'm a fan of all of us getting the same information, and as we all develop as board members, we bring other things back to the table for the board as a whole. I just caution individual relationships that are not, again, something could happen, that person goes away, that relationship starts to settle. What my question would be is, which stakeholders are at the table as we're looking at developing programs for our citizens to be ready to go into those jobs that are coming? Are the schools, TCC, economic development, is everybody already at the table? And if that's the case, then I'm not opposed to a member of the board also being at that table to report back to us with all the other members at the table.
That's precisely.
Is there some type of joint venture already in place, Mr. Moore, where?
Yeah, so everything we do, and you hear me say this all the time, everything that is done in economic development, and again, I'm trying to speak from the deputy standpoint, but I don't want to take it from Mr. Donahue's thunder, but everything that's done in economic development is based off relationships. This entire workforce development program was put together based off of the ecosystem that is in place. So the relationships are already there with the TCCs, the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, HRT, ATI, a number of different partners. So that's why I think, again, Ms. Kroom coming in, like I said, about that January, February timeframe, give you an overview of the program. I mean, a majority of you all were here for the ribbon cutting. I get that. And that was to celebrate. But let's get down into the numbers, into the weeds of what this is, so you understand who all is at play. Also, what I will tell you, and Ms. Beaton, surprised I haven't thrown something at me already. If you go to our brand new Portsmouth at Work website, you can see the partners that we are already partnering with. So if you just go to portsmouthatwork.com, just like that, you can see all of that information as far as who we're already partnering with, the programs that we have associated with those partners, and so forth. And again, I just think the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. And I would wholeheartedly agree that a retreat to establish your identity is the way forward.
Okay. Any other further conversation?
Forgive my naivete, what's the purpose or value of having a retreat when I thought that was the purpose of this board itself, is to discuss things like this? Versus, okay, let's step aside and have a retreat or discussions
I
of
think it's
certain
the time
things.
constraint in this meeting, mostly. And then it's more structured toward things that we have on the agenda. And I guess that at a retreat, you can have an out-of-the-box conversation that doesn't follow this agenda itself. So we can bring things so that way, does that make sense? No?
And it's more of an open discussion where everyone can get on the same page, so we don't sit here and when commissioners bring stuff to the table, it causes us to be in a 30-minute conversation, 45 minutes. We can have a retreat and it can be outlined and we can come back here and already know where we're going as far as progression for the board.
And I think it was key, establishing our identity, and establishing a plan, because these meetings aren't for us to establish a plan. It's basically where we get our financial reports and things of that nature, and a retreat wouldn't suffice that. We have to figure out where our priorities lie. With the limited funding that we have, do we do the grants? Are we looking to do mediation? I think at a retreat, a facilitator will help us stay out of the source, my Philly dialect was about to come out. Stay out of the sausage making of it all. Corral us together. What is important to you? What is important to you? How do we prioritize that? And have a give and take. We can't do everything, but maybe, because in our mind, what's important to us is just important to us, and the facilitator could give us the opportunity to say, well, you can't do all of it. So what pieces can you put on the table so that you still feel valued and what's important to you moves forward, but then collectively, we all have a blueprint on how we're pushing forward, so that we're not round and around and around it all the time, hearing about Burton's Point Road forever in 2 days.
Those are the exact points that I think we should be discussing here. When I think retreat, and here again, it's my naivete. When I see or think of retreat, I think informal. I think this process here in this board as formal. And if we're going to discuss priorities, to me, that falls more on the formal side versus informal.
We have to informally form ourselves to move forward, because again, the retreat wouldn't necessarily have to be a public meeting, or would it?
It would be a public meeting.
It would be a public meeting.
Be a public meeting.
Okay, so
It wouldn't
with
be
a
recorded.
retreat, again, it would offer, this is not the time for us to really strategize some options that each person brings to the table. We don't have enough knowledge base. Also at a retreat, we could bring in additional information at one time. So when we're asking about this, it's not that we have to get it reported back. We would get that information to staff. So during the retreat, we are going through everything, and a retreat takes several hours for us to go through everything, ask additional questions, then set the priority. This is not enough time, and there's not enough information present at every meeting to set our priority. And that's why we kind of go around and around some of the same topics over and over again. So that would be the purpose of the retreat, to gain information on this, information on that. So everybody submits that information. And then at that point, we narrow it down. Phase 1 of our strategic plan, stage 2 of a strategic plan. Most strategic plans are not carried out during the actual business of the board. They're carried out development-wise, and then we continue to move forward with them. And then we revisit them. We can revisit it during the meeting, but it would behoove us to start to have an actual plan.
Okay, that being said, I'm in agreement with the idea of a retreat. I hope we can actually come away from the retreat with some great actions and results.
And that's where our facilitator will help us with that.
Yeah, as opposed to, well, let's have another retreat to discuss this retreat, and then.
No, a facilitator will walk us through that, so we're not all together. Oh, what about this? It's not, a facilitator will streamline it and keep it organized.
And retreats usually happen like every year, so you just following up from the previous year. What could we have done better? What can we change?
That makes sense.
Off the hamster's wheel.
Right.
That makes
We're
sense.
just constantly.
So long as it's productive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
What I'd like to do is go ahead and work at the staff level to identify a day and time. I think in all likelihood we'll follow your regular scheduled business meeting, where we could have a regular meeting and then roll into afterwards a separate retreat. Although we can certainly work to identify a date in the near future for that to occur, identify a facilitator who would be present to assist in that process, identify the priorities. It's timely. I think we've been working through some outstanding items. I think we've got some resolution to that. So charting the course going forward, I think is appropriate now. So if you allow for staff to come back and provide some recommendations, we can certainly work between now and the next meeting to figure out the date process for
Consensus for that, Mr. Swinton?
That's fine.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Dale?
Yes.
Vice Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes.
Ms. McSwain? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
To a point Mr. Parr brought up earlier, next meeting dates. I'm pulling up the calendar. Our next meeting
December 28th.
would be December 28th. Do we wish to keep it at that time frame or move it forward? What are your thoughts?
Keep it there.
Traditionally, do we meet in this, I'm sorry.
Nope.
Traditionally, do we meet in December?
No.
It's my belief that staff has enough on their plate, to be able to work through, until January. And I don't think we need another meeting.
Mr. Swenson?
I agree with Brady.
I know it's ironic I would say that,
That's what they've been doing.
If I may, I think we do have a number of tasks to deal with between now and
Right.
of January. There will be some, staff out for the holidays during that week, but I think there's certainly enough work to happen behind the scenes between now and the January meeting. And we can certainly work to have a number of these items as follow-ups in January.
Yeah.
All right then.
the board may not look the same in January. Some of us are due to come off, I think.
Are you,
No?
are they turning out? Are you saying?
Yeah, I think some of us are terming out. I know I am.
I think whoever you replace.
Yeah, it's whatever
They
their
end up
time
there
frame
about
was, yeah. So you'd have to be reappointed.
Right.
That's
We
right.
all replace people, I thought.
Yeah,
every single one of us. So it's staggered.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so we need to see where we are as far as reappointment to the board.
Yeah, I do believe the city clerk, if you have not been contacted, will be reaching out to contact you if your term is coming up. So stay tuned if that is the case. I'm sure they will be in contact.
I'd just like to say, if I do come off the board, that it has been a real pleasure to work with everybody. And I think we're making Portsmouth a better place.
Absolutely.
Any additional items submitted by commissioners? Barring none, everyone have a safe and full holiday. Oh, hold on.
One item, if I
Yeah.
can interrupt the conclusion of the meeting. Madam Chair, I did want to announce that Thursday, December 2nd, the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce will be holding its city managers forum. Ms. Jones, in addition to the other city managers in the Hampton Roads region, will be participating in a panel discussion on December 2nd that is being held at the Chesapeake Conference Center. Our office has purchased a table. We do have 2 seats available for PPIC members if you would like to
What time is
identify and designate those to attend. It is again Thursday, December 2nd from noon until 2 p.m. We would just need to know who would be in attendance.
If you're interested in attending, please email me.
No. We'll have to see.
Live stream?
I don't know.
Oh, is it why? I don't believe it's
Give
I don't
everybody
think
the
so.
opportunity first, and if there's
Yeah.
no, then I will attend, but I want other people to be able to have that opportunity if so desired.
I think y'all should go. And that's just my opinion. I chair, vice chair, if you desire, you really give us opportunity if you don't.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset if someone else would like to attend, I want you to have that experience. If you don't, then I'm fine with going. That's not a problem. But I don't want to, I'm never going to be a person that I want to go to this, and not offer the opportunity for someone else to have that experience and have that dialogue with people in the room. So if you're interested in going, email me. If you're not, that's fine too. And then we can round robin it, Vice Chair and I.
I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce. Are they paid? Is it open to all chamber members? I can check on that, because if it is, I can attend just as a chamber member and then leave the 2 seats open.
I don't have that information. I would assume so, but I do
It's not
believe that.
invite only or
Or
closed
invite
or
only,
anything like
gotcha.
that. So you should be able to go as just a private member or even just a member of the
Gotcha.
public.
Gotcha,
Pricing might be different for chamber members, but
gotcha.
When do you need to know about the
As
attendees?
soon as you
possible,
can.
because next week is the following week.
So far, you're gonna attend as a member, right?
Well, I'm seeing if
Oh,
it's possible.
So we need to know
By
by
Friday?
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else interested?
It's $50 to attend, so I'll attend.
Only if they're not, I don't want to take a seat.
Well, Chair, I'm not, my work schedule won't permit me to go. Like, I would love to go, but I'm just gonna save the ego.
How about you, Sarah? Are you interested? Then I would not be interested.
I'm not interested.
Swenson?
He's like,
You can go ahead and attend.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Other than to say, a happy Thanksgiving, safe Thanksgiving to that. Thank you for the work that you all do, your supporting staff, we do appreciate it, and the time that you commit as well. So I hope you have a wonderful holiday.
Everyone have a great holiday.
Thank you.
Sure.